Okay. Morning. What I want to look at this morning is something that we're so used to as living in South Africa, especially, and that is eating meat. So the Torah says, "Ki yarchiv Adonai Elohecha es gvulcha," that when you go into Eretz Yisrael, excuse me, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu ki yarchiv, when he expands your borders, kasher dibelach, as Hashem said he would, and you'll say, "Ochla basar," I want to eat meat. I want to eat some meat. Why? Ki ta'aveh nafshecha le'echol basar. The reason you want to eat meat because you have like this desire to eat meat, this urge to eat meat. B'chol avat nafshecha tochal basar. Then you can eat meat whenever you wish. Now, why is that such a big thing? Because in the people are now they're moving from the desert into Eretz Yisrael, and in the desert, the Rabbeinu Bechaya tells us that whilst they were in the desert, that the meat that they ate was bamidbar kol basar shayu ochlim akol hayu shlamim. All the meat that they ate was the meat of shlamim, of some type of korbanot that they brought. Now they're going to be going into Eretz Yisrael. They're not going to all be together. They're not going to only be bringing up shlamim. There's going to be animals around them, and they're going to be living in this place. And what happens? They want to eat meat, and it's no longer korbanot. Are they allowed to eat meat? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, right, whatever you wish, you can eat. The Rashi points out, it's very important Rashi. The Rashi says, Ki archiv lamda Torah derech eretz, that the Torah is teaching us derech eretz. What's the derech eretz? Shelo yitaveh adam le'echol basar ele mitoch rachavat yadayim v'oshem. That a person should not want to eat meat, but only if he has a certain level of rachavat yadayim, a certain expansiveness, a sense of peace and harmony, and v'osher, and wealth. Because that means that he's got everything he needs and he can eat it. There's a fascinating Chasam Sofer that the Chasam Sofer quotes from the Gemara and from some great old sources. He says that the pasuk is talking to Tzadikei Yisrael, that is talking about to the tzaddikim, that they don't get any benefit from this world. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, like Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Rabbeinu HaKadosh is the author of the Mishnahs. Because what? Yada b'nafsho, because he knew, Im yomar ochla basar, yada b'birur ki tavat nafshecha le'echol. He said that when according to the way the Chasam Sofer presents the great tzaddikim, they don't really want to enjoy this world. They don't have any desires in this world. I once saw Rav Pinchas Scheinberg. He was one of the Gedolei Yisrael. And so his wife served him lunch. And what was his lunch? A tomato. And it was like so striking that's all he ate. Because the real greats, they're not connected into this world in such a way. And so therefore, why would they say that they want to eat meat? So he says, because ki nafsho HaKadosha ta'aveh la'alot nitzotzit ba'al achai. That because they're great, and that's why it says ki tavat nafshecha. It's the taiva of the nefesh, the taiva of the spiritual taiva, the spiritual desire to eat meat. And what's the spiritual desire to eat meat? To be able, the Hasidic concept, to elevate the sparks of kedusha within this animal, and in doing that, by eating it, by shechting it, by doing all that process that one has to go through, you elevate the sparks. So that's one way of understanding it. But everybody else seems to take it on a much more practical level, that we're talking about a situation where a person's living in wealth, they want to eat, they can eat meat. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says you can eat meat, and it's not a problem to eat the meat under certain circumstances. The Emek Dava, the Netziv says, this is all about being wealthy. It's all about having more than you really need. And then that you'll say, I want to eat meat. Why? Says because it's the way of the wealthy people to eat meat. Now listen to these next words. Even if they don't really desire it. Even if they don't really desire it. And I think we, especially, we have quite a meat-eating culture in this country. We don't have like major desire for meat. It's not like something we're missing, something that we don't have often, but we eat it anyway. So that's what he says. I want to eat meat. Why? Kitave. He says that's on the one hand where there's wealth and everybody's got everything they need, or because you just say, I want it because I feel a belief. Even if you're not wealthy, maybe you just want to eat meat. You can. B'chol avat nafshecha comes and tells us that we are allowed to do it. We're allowed to eat this meat if we want to eat the meat without having to worry. He says, but when there's a situation where you're living far from the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu called his name, but far from what we know is now Yerushalayim, then the Torah says you can slaughter the animals as Hashem has commanded you, right? And you can eat them in your own spaces, in your own settlements, in the place where you live, as according to what you desire. So Rashi says on that pasuk, Rashi here, that says that what happens if you can't? If you want to bring certain korbanot, you want to bring shlamim, you want to bring offerings to Hashem because you just want to say thank you. Now, in the time of the desert, you could easily do it because you're there right there with the Mishkan. But when you're living in the land of Israel, some people living in the Galil or living in the deep south, so they can't. So what do you have to do? So then it's okay. Says Rashi that you can't come. You're allowed to eat, but v'zavachta mib karcha umitzanacha. That you have to. The word v'zavachta we normally is a zevach. We normally translate is a korban. But Rashi says v'zavachta lamadnu sheyesh tzivui bezvicha he'ach yishchot. Here is where we learn that if we are going to eat meat, we have to eat meat in a through shchita. And where do we learn the halachas of shchita? If you look through the Torah, you will not find anywhere where it describes the halachas of shchita. It's not there. The halachas of shchita are what we call halachas Moshe Sinai, halachas that Hashem taught Moshe, and he taught them down, and they're not written down anywhere. And really, the halachas of shchita are one of the great examples of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, because it's only in this pasuk over here, v'zavachta karcha, which it says that you have to shecht your animals, that we learn that we have to eat it in a special way, and we have to shecht it in a special way in order to be able to eat it. That carries on the Torah and says, in the same way that you eat the tzvi and the ayal, a gazelle and a deer, that's how you must eat the meat in your area. The unclean and the clean may be eaten together. What does this mean? Rashi says, it means that when you're eating them, you don't have to be, if you want to have a piece of meat, if you want to bring a korban and you want to eat from the korban, you have to do it batara. You have to do it in a space of purity. But if it's your own meat, you just want to have a braai, so there's no obligation to that. So if that's the case, then maybe you can think everything's mutar, but no, not everything's mutar. There's certain distinctions in the things that we meet, with the things that we eat, rak, but there is a condition. So it seems to be right now what the Torah has done is given us permission to eat meat. We have to do shchita. That we understand, because that's halacha Moshe Sinai. But rak chazak, the Torah says rak chazak. You have to be strong. Levilti achol hadam. You must not eat the blood. Why? Ki adam wa nefesh. Because the blood is the nefesh, is the life force. Lo tochal nefesh im habasar. You shouldn't eat the life force together with the flesh. Rashi says that why does it say chazak? Why do you have to say you have to be strong not to eat the blood? They mamish really wanted to eat the blood. And therefore Hashem has to say, be strong. Be strong in yourself. You find the strength in yourself to overcome this physical desire to eat the blood. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Shimon ben Azai comes along and he says, hold on a second. Lo katuv ele lahazircha lelamdcha ad kama ata tzarich lischazek b'mitzvos. Comes along, Rabbi Shimon ben Azai says that the Torah is coming to teach you not only the story about blood, but it's coming to teach you a much, much bigger picture. And that is how strong we need to be when it comes to mitzvahs. If blood, which is easy to guard ourselves from, right? Because not every people want to eat blood, people want to eat nice meat. A person doesn't desire the blood itself. The Torah has to come and give us the word chazak, that we've got to be strong in avoiding it, something that we don't even want to do. How much more so for all other mitzvahs. So the Torah has gone from a process of giving us the permission to eat blood, the permission to eat meat, then it starts defining it down and down and down. Ultimately, it comes to this point where it says you can't eat the blood. Why? There's a big machlokes here amongst the Tanaim. On the one hand, it says because we have to be strong. It's difficult. You have to really overcome yourself. I mean, I've never personally eaten a piece of treif meat, but apparently it's much juicier. I don't know. Apparently it's much juicier because it contains within it that blood. We're not allowed to eat that. So perhaps there is a desire for that. On the other hand, Rabbi Shimon ben Azai said there's no desire for that. But because even though there's no desire, the Torah says be strong. How much more so when there are situations where we may have to really dig deep to find the strength within, that we have to that we've got to find that, and we find it from the weakest points so that we can build onto the strongest points, which is quite a fundamental part in the way we're supposed to, in our spiritual growth, is that when a person starts growing, they need to find, not always dump in the most difficult things. I remember Rabbi Goldfein told us once that his teachers taught him that when a person is becoming a Baal Tshuva, they mustn't take on the most difficult things in the world, but rather they must take on the thing that they need to do in its most basic form. So he's at that point in time, he's just talking about, so for example, Chalav Yisrael. Should a person take on, which is a chumrah according to the way we paskin, right? Should a person take on Chalav Yisrael when they're just getting into Yiddishkeit? And his answer was no, because that's a much stricter form. If you start with the easier things, then you can build up in the strictness, and that's really what Rabbi Shimon ben Azai is telling us. Yeah, you're not allowed to eat the nefesh im basar. And here Rashi tells us from the Gemara in Chulin something fascinating. We know that we've got Shiva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, the 7 mitzvahs of Noach, one of which is this concept of Eiver min achai. They're not allowed to eat a limb of a live animal. Here, at this point in time, the Torah, as Hara la'eva min achai, says Rashi, tells us that it's also a mitzvah, because the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, those 7 mitzvahs are not for Am Yisrael. They're a completely separate section of mitzvahs that exist for the non-Jewish world that they have to adhere to. We've got the 613 mitzvahs that are completely separate. And where is it? Where do we find this issue of Eiver min achai? Yes, but I know I have it. But do we have it as well? Here it is. What? Lo tochal hanefesh im basar. You're not allowed to eat the nefesh, the life force, together with the basar. Eiver min achai, a limb of a live animal. It seems to be quite an uncommon thing. I mean, you always check them. You kill the animal first before you eat it. But there are certain circumstances I once saw about how the Bushmen would, like, they make a hole in the animal in order to drink the blood, in order to give them some type of liquid sometimes. And so that we see that these things do exist. The Torah says you're not allowed to do it. But what should you do? Lo tochlenu, you're not allowed to eat it. Ala aretz tishbechenu kamayim. We have to throw it onto the ground like water. So says the Netziv that says when it comes to a korban, that we know that you're not to, we have to be careful. We have to be careful because it's elevated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, must be careful. We don't just throw it on the ground. And what do? We take ground and we cover it. So it goes onto the ground. We don't eat it, but we don't just leave it out because it's still a part of the life force, and therefore we cover it. We have the mitzvah of kisui adam, the mitzvah of covering the blood. But what we see from here is a fundamental part of our process and understanding of mitzvahs. Yes, we're allowed to do certain things, and even the things that we are allowed to do have got certain restrictions on them. Those restrictions are either to tell us to dig deep and be strong, or to tell us that when it's easier to be strong, we learn to use that as a building block of our own emunah, our own foundations, our own yirat Hashem, in order to make it, when it comes to the more difficult things, that those more difficult things, we already have that foundation. Let's stop there. Have a beautiful day, everybody.